sense of themselves at that time looked the least dated. And I think that's probably...
That's why Einstein always looks good.
That's why he always looks as fresh as he does, yeah.
Steely Dan has left its mark in the hearts of fans with its unique jazz rock melodies, sophisticated lyrics, and mesmerizing performances. Walter Becker played a key role in the band's success, with his virtuosic guitar playing, exceptional songwriting ability, and unique artistic vision. In this video, we will delve into Walter Becker's musical journey, from the early days of his career to becoming a legend in the music industry. It will be a fascinating yet tragic story. Walter Becker's life has gone through many ups and downs. One of the most significant influences on Walter Becker's early life was the conflict that existed between his parents. Due to the fact that they were no longer together, little Becker was placed in the care of his father and his paternal grandmother. This change exposed him to a world that was characterized by absence and yearning. An important part of Becker's upbringing was played by his father, who was a successful businessman. This particular role became even more vital when Becker's destiny took a more negative turn. The heart attack that Becker's father had when Becker was just 16 years old was a terrifying event for the young teenager. Becker's father's health had taken a terrible turn for the worse. An even more catastrophic blow was about to be delivered, and this horrible experience led up to it. Not much longer after that, Becker's father suffered another deadly heart attack while traveling back to the United States from Germany on a business trip. Unfortunately, he passed away. Becker went through a time of great disillusionment as a result of the influence that these losses had on his life, which resonated throughout his experiences. Becker disclosed his feelings on the event in a candid interview with Rolling Stone in the year 2000. He stated, "I reacted negatively to it in a number of different ways, and nothing captured my imagination again for a while." A big misunderstanding surrounding his mother added to the fallout of the loss of his father, which was already a difficult time for him. Immediately following the breakup, Becker's mother, who was originally from England, went back to England, which led him to erroneously assume that she had also perished dead. This misperception threw a lengthy shadow over his youth, leaving him with a tremendous sense of abandonment and loss. It left him feeling as though he had been abandoned. It was only years later that Becker uncovered the truth about his mother. Driven by a need for closure and understanding, he tracked her down in England. This revelation that his mother was, in fact, alive brought with it a new set of emotional challenges. The relationship between them was strained and complicated, marred by years of absence and misunderstanding. His family situation was really rough early on, noted Larry Klein, a close friend and collaborator who worked with Becker on his 2008 solo album Circus Money. He lost his dad early and had a troubled relationship with his mother, and that was a source of pain for him. That has a tendency to form a dark sense of humor. You're either going to laugh or cry all the time. Growing up within the confines of a fractured family, he cultivated a pronounced cynicism towards human nature, including his own. The challenges he faced did not overshadow his extraordinary ability to keenly observe and mimic those around him. Becker delved into the hidden recesses of people's psyches, translating his profound insights into art that was both witty and incisive. This unique perspective, coupled with a razor-sharp wit, would become the hallmarks of his creative journey. The familial discord he experienced only served to deepen his artistic reservoir. Music became his sanctuary, offering solace amidst the chaos of his upbringing. The vibrant musical scene of Manhattan provided fertile ground for his burgeoning talent. Initially starting with the saxophone, Becker eventually transitioned to the guitar. Under the mentorship of his neighbor, Randy California, he honed his skills, laying the foundation for his future in music. This period of intense learning and adaptation set the stage for his iconic contributions to the music world, where his unique blend of insight and talent would leave an indelible mark. While attending Bard College in Annandale-on-Hudson, New York, Donald Fagen was fortunate enough to have a chance meeting that would alter the trajectory of his life, as well as the landscape of rock music. It was in the Red Balloon, the campus coffee shop, that he caught his first glimpse of Walter Becker's guitar performance for the first time. The sound that Becker produced was one that was professional, up-to-date, and infused with a distinctive character that Fagen resonated with on a profound level. He was particularly impressed by the depth and soul in Becker's playing, which he compared to that of a black musician. This was high praise considering that they both had a deep appreciation for the rich traditions of jazz and blues. Both Fagen and Becker immediately realized that they had a great deal of similarities. Jazz, blues, and a wide range of popular genres were among the several types of music that they both enjoyed listening to. Their affinity for black humor and their love of literature, notably the writings of Vladimir Nabokov, were major factors that contributed to their successful relationship. As a result of this intellectual and cultural synergy, they decided to work together on a musical project. They made the decision to establish a band that they dubbed Leather Canary, and they recruited another student named Chevy Chase, who would later become a comedian and actor, to play drums. In spite of Chase's tongue-in-cheek description of the trio as a bad jazz band, Fagen and Becker found that their early cooperation was an important experience that helped shape their musical identities. Their partnership deepened, and by 1969, Becker made the pivotal decision to leave Bard College without completing his degree. He and Fagen relocated to Brooklyn, driven by a mutual desire to pursue their musical dreams. They began their quest by trying to sell their songs in the legendary Brill Building in Midtown Manhattan, a renowned hub for songwriters and music publishers. Their determination eventually caught the attention of Kenny Vance, a member of the vocal group Jay and the Americans, who had a production office in the building. Vance recognized their talent and potential, offering them the opportunity to work with him. This connection with Vance was a crucial stepping stone in Fagen and Becker's career. It provided them with their first real break in the music industry, allowing them to hone their songwriting and production skills. Their experiences in the Brill Building also exposed them to the intricacies of the music business, teaching them valuable lessons that would later influence their own approach to music production. Kenny Vance, a member of the pop group Jay and the Americans, eventually invited Donald Fagen and Walter Becker into the band's office to hear their music. Among the tunes they played was an early version of Charlie Freak, which would later appear on their album Pretzel Logic. Telling the story of a homeless man who overdoses, Vance recalls Donald was very reserved and Walter was sort of the mouthpiece for the two of them. They came in and Walter stood next to Donald, who played the piano, and they performed their songs. Vance was struck by their unique combination of influences, including references to 50s jazz, the works of William Burroughs, and their unusual chord changes. Nobody had ever combined those elements into a contemporary song. It was a different world, Vance noted. Impressed by their originality, Vance signed them to a publishing deal and brought them on as backup musicians for Jay and the Americans. During this time, Becker adopted the pseudonym Gustav Mahler, while Fagen took on the alias Tristan Fabriani. They had some sort of intellectual joke they shared that nobody else was privy to, Vance observed. Walter always had the ability to crack Donald up. Through Vance's connections, Becker and Fagen were offered the opportunity to compose music for the soundtrack of the low-budget 1971 film You've Gotta Walk It Like You Talk It, or You'll Lose That Beat, which featured Richard Pryor. Adopting their aliases, Gus Mahler and Tristan Fabriani, they began to establish themselves as a songwriting duo while continuing to tour with Jay and the Americans. During this period, unauthorized demos from 1968 to 1971 began to circulate, showcasing Becker and Fagen's early work and raw talent before the formation of Steely Dan. These early experiences were foundational for Becker and Fagen, allowing them to develop their distinctive sound and approach to music. The combination of their eclectic influences and intellectual humor set the stage for the creation of Steely Dan, which would go on to become one of the most innovative and influential bands of the 1970s. Their journey from college musicians to renowned artists is marked by their creative partnership and unique vision, which continues to inspire and captivate audiences worldwide. These early recordings were typified by their lack of elaborate arrangements and low-fidelity production, with some songs being re-recorded for official albums at a later time. Becker and Fagen also made contributions to Linda Hoover's album I Mean to Shine in 1970, which was ultimately released in 2022 after struggling with license complications for a few years. This occurred during this time period. After moving to Brooklyn, they experienced a limited amount of success despite their efforts, and it wasn't until Barbra Streisand recorded their song I Mean to Shine for her album in 1971 that they broke through. By moving to Los Angeles in 1971, Becker and Fagen were able to become staff writers for ABC Records, which ultimately led to the formation of the band that would later be known as Steely Dan. This relocation brought about an irreversible transformation in their life. Becker and Fagen quickly abandoned the strict band method and opted for studio professionals. This technique let them cease touring, which they loathed, and focus on record making. Dan's music became increasingly complex and thematically provocative with each album that they released. When Michael McDonald sought to provide backing vocals to Dr. Wu on the album Katy Lied, which was released in 1975, he discovered that Fagen and Becker put artists through sessions that were extremely difficult. McDonald adds, "I just felt like I was missing something, of course. They did not make any apologies for admitting it. A significant portion of it was done in jest, although Walter would ask, "Have you been to the doctor in the recent past? It ought to be simple for you to do this. What exactly is the issue?" Their job supervisors were quite strict. They are not harsh, but they have established a very high standard. As an instrumentalist, Becker made significant contributions, whether it was playing bass on each of the band's first 3 albums or ripping spiky guitar solos on FM No Static at All Bad Sneakers and Black Friday. His efforts were vital. On the other hand, he was quite pleased to delegate his roles to session professionals. Elliot Shiner, an engineer, describes him as an unbelievable guitar player. Every note that came out of his guitar was so unusual, Shiner adds. However, there were numerous instances in which he refused to participate, and I was never able to comprehend the reason behind his refusal. The following is an explanation that Becker provided to RS at a later time. "Donald and I had more of an idea that comes from an East Coast brill-building tradition of an almighty producer, when you had a Liber installer, or at its extreme, a Phil Spector, who knew exactly what they wanted." As a result of Gary Katz, an associate of producer Elliot Vance, hiring them as staff composers for ABC Records in Los Angeles, their fortunes began to shift. Throughout the decade of the 1970s, Katz would go on to produce all of their albums, working closely with engineer Roger Nichols. Between the years 1970 and 2001, Nichols was a significant contributor to the band, and through his work with them, he was awarded a total of 6 Grammy Awards. In response to Katz's recommendation, Becker and Fagen made the decision to establish their own band. David Palmer, drummer Jim Hodder, guitarist Denny Dias, and guitarist Jeff "Skunk" Baxter were all members of the band that they chose to recruit. The band was given the moniker Steely Dan, which was derived from a steam-powered dildo that was referenced in the novel Naked Lunch, written by William S. Burroughs. As a second lead vocalist, Palmer was brought on board to assist Fagen in overcoming his periodic bouts of stage fright and to address the worries that the record company had regarding Fagen's voice. Steely Dan's first album, titled Can't Buy a Thrill, was released in 1972, following the release of a handful of singles that were not successful. There were major songs from the album such as Do It Again and Reelin' in the years, which both reached No. 6 and No. 11 on the Billboard charts, respectively. The album achieved fame quite rapidly. These songs, along with others such as Dirty Work, which was sung by David Palmer, established themselves as favorites on the radio. In the beginning, Palmer was responsible for most of the live vocal responsibilities because Donald Fagen was reluctant to appear in front of an audience. However, Palmer eventually quit the band when Gary Katz and Walter Becker made the decision that they preferred Fagen's renditions of their songs. As a result, Fagen was able to take over the lead vocals during the band's first tour. Steely Dan's musical versatility was on full display when the album Pretzel Logic was released at the beginning of 1974. Ricky, Don't Lose That Number, which reached No. 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, was one of the songs that was included on the album. Additionally, the CD includes a note-for-note performance of East St. Louis Toodle-Oo, which was performed by Duke Ellington and James Bubber Miley. Additionally, this was the first album by Steely Dan in which Becker made his debut playing guitar rather than bass. As the music of Steely Dan matured, a major split arose between Becker and Fagen and the other members of the band, notably Jeff "Skunk" Baxter and Jim Hodder, who were more interested in prolonged touring. Becker and Fagen were the lead members of Steely Dan. Becker and Fagen, on the other hand, favored to devote their entire attention to writing and recording themselves in the studio. The departure of the other members, who felt more sidelined as a result of this divergence in goals, was the result of this divide. For future albums, Steely Dan relied on a revolving cast of session musicians to generate their signature sound. This move occurred after the band had already established themselves as a studio-focused band. During the time when McDonald continued to make contributions to Steely Dan up until the time that the band took a break after the release of their album Gaucho in 1980, Diaz remained a member of the band until that point. On July 5, 1974, Steely Dan embarked on their farewell tour, which took place in the western state of California. During the recording of the album Katy Lied, which was released in 1975, Becker and Fagen assembled a diverse group of session musicians. On the other hand, despite the fact that they gained gold status with hits such as Black Friday and Bad Sneakers, they issued a public apology for the album's poor sound quality, which was caused by a DBX noise reduction device that was not operating properly. The album Katy Lied had a variety of songs that were particularly memorable, such as Dr. Wu and Chain Lightning. Following this, in May of 1976, they released their third studio album, which was named The Royal Scam. This album was released immediately following this. Larry Carlton contributed a significant amount of guitar work to this album, while drummer Bernard Purdy also contributed recordings at various points. On the other hand, Haitian Divorce was a massive hit in the United Kingdom, boosting album sales and becoming Steely Dan's first substantial hit in that nation. This was despite the fact that The Royal Scam did not have a single that stood out in the United States. During the 1980s, when the movie Gaucho was released, Becker's life began to unravel and become increasingly stressful. In spite of the fact that he was successful with the film Aja, in 1977, Becker had to deal with a variety of personal and professional obstacles, one of which was a battle against an addiction to narcotics. On January 30th, 1980, his fiancée Karen Roberta Stanley, who also managed the band, tragically died as a consequence of an overdose on heroin that occurred in his residence. This ultimately resulted in a case for wrongful death being filed against him, which he ultimately settled out of court. The event took place in 1978, after the two had moved to New York from their previous location. New York City continued to provide Becker with difficulties. Becker suffered many fractures to his right leg as a consequence of this accident, which was caused by a taxicab. He was only just getting started with the challenges that he had to deal with. Due to the fact that Becker was hospitalized during the process of finishing the mix for Gaucho, the only way he was able to participate in the collaboration with Fagen and Katz was via the use of telephone conversations. As a consequence of the physically hard sessions of Gaucho, Becker's relationship with Fagen grew strained, and he finally fell into a growing heroin problem. Fagen's addiction to heroin was a contributing factor. In June of 1981, Becker and Fagen made the choice to end their cooperation. This decision was taken owing to the challenging recording process of the album Gaucho in 1980, as well as the commercial pressures that they were experiencing at the time. By the time the 70s came to a close, his habits had already taken their toll on him, and we had lost touch for a period of time, Fagen wrote in his journal. For the purpose of focusing on his life, Becker took the choice to retire to Maui, Hawaii, which was the location where Steely Dan had performed in 1974. During the year 1981, Becker became acquainted with Eleanor Meadows, a yoga instructor in the area, and later wed her. During the same time period, he made the acquisition of a farm on the secluded island that was commonly visited by hippies. There were avocado plants and apple trees on the farm. His decision to adopt a new way of life resulted in him permanently abstaining from the usage of drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes. Following his decision to make the conversion, Becker started cultivating avocados and began to become an authority on contemporary culture. Some of the activities that he participated in were mountain biking, tai chi, surfing, and eating a diet that was rich in beneficial nutrients. According to MacDonald, who paid Becker a visit in Hawaii with the purpose of studying him, he really seemed to embrace the spirit of being in a place like Hawaii. MacDonald recalls, "When I thought back on it, I had the idea that Walter had found some peace and quiet there. With the intention of evading many of the terrible occurrences that had taken place in his recent past, he found a place to go." Becker continued to remain active in the music industry even after he had withdrawn from the public front and no longer appeared in the public eye. In addition to working with vocalists like Michael Franks and Ricky Lee Jones, he also produced songs for bands like Fra Lippo Lippi and China Crisis. He was actively involved in the music industry. In 1986, he worked with Donald Fagen once again on Rosie Vella's debut album, which was titled Zazu. This was due to the fact that he was so impressed with the record. There were a number of events that Becker participated in throughout the year 1991, and one of them was the New York Rock and Soul Review. Becker and Fagen continued their creative partnership in the early 1990s, with Becker producing Fagen's album Kamakiriad. In 1993, and Fagen co-producing Becker's debut solo album 11 Tracks of Whack in 1994. Both albums were released in the same year. The year in which both albums were released was the same. As an additional point of interest, Steely Dan embarked on their first tour in over 20 years, which ultimately resulted in the release of their live album, which was named Alive in America, during the year 1995. Their comeback gained momentum with the publication of their first studio album in 20 years, which was titled Two Against Nature and was published in the year 2000. This record was successful in gaining some momentum. This album was not only the beginning of their comeback, but it was also praised and awarded 4 Grammys, including Album of the Year. In addition, it marked the beginning of their return. During the course of their time spent together, the pair was honored with additional recognition in the form of induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the awarding of honorary doctorates from Berklee College of Music in the year 2001. Both of these events took place on the same day. An important factor that contributed to the band's continued popularity inside the country was the publication of the album Everything Must Go in the year 2003, which was then followed by a tour that took place all across the country. During this time period, Becker maintained his involvement in the music industry all during this period. In addition to releasing his second solo album, Circus Money, in the year 2008, he was also involved in the creation of songs for other artists. In recognition of the significant contributions he had made to the field of music, he was inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame in the year 2008. This honor was bestowed upon him in recognition of his accomplishments. Steely Dan has firmly established themselves as one of the most important and productive bands in the evolution of popular music throughout the course of its history. Over the course of their career, they have produced an extraordinary repertoire that includes 9 studio albums, 2 live and video albums, 12 compilation albums, 22 singles, and 2 box sets. This is the reason why they have achieved such success. The extraordinary collection of musical instruments that Becker possessed, which included hundreds of guitars and amplifiers, was one of the reasons he became so well known. Due to the fact that his collection was so enormous, he received a great deal of positive attention. Immediately after his departure, Julian's organized an auction to sell his equipment, which finally resulted in a value that surpassed all prior records, reaching $3.3 million. This was the outcome of the sale. The outstanding quality of his collection was successfully highlighted via this auction as a result of the fact that he had personally utilized each and everything that was included in his collection. Becker was the first person to present the idea of GAS, which stands for Guitar Acquisition Syndrome, in a column that he wrote for Guitar Player magazine in the year 1994. Within the confines of this column, he made the initial presentation of the concept. The following is a presentation of an extra point of interest. In order to describe the conduct that was taking place in the music industry following that period of time, the term gear acquisition syndrome was subsequently established. The year 1975 was the year when Becker and Juana Fatoros finally agreed to be married and became husband and wife. There was a celebration of their nuptials that took place at this event. In the end, he wed Eleanor Roberta Meadows in 1984, and the couple went on to produce a son named Kawhi and an adopted daughter named Sion. Both of their children were adopted. Before they were even born, both of their children were adopted by other people. In the years that followed, he concluded his relationship with Eleanor Roberta Meadows and tied the knot with her. When Becker began his second career as a producer, he and his family were residing on a cattle ranch that also had a recording studio. Located in the heart of the country was where the ranch could be found. In the course of this time period, Becker was in the process of beginning his second line of work. 1997 was the year when they finally put the finishing touches on their divorce after a period of time had passed. As a consequence of Becker's efforts, the song Little Kawhi, which he composed with the intention of paying tribute to his son, was ultimately selected to be the 11th and final track on the album Whack. His union with Delia Saifi was the last one he ever tied the knot with till that point in his life. As a result of a routine medical test that took place in the spring of 2017, it was found that Becker was afflicted with a particularly aggressive form of esophageal cancer. This turned out to be the condition that was identified. The rapid growth of the sickness prevented him from attending Steely Dan's performances in the months that followed, despite the fact that he was receiving intense treatment for the ailment. This was the case despite the fact that he was suffering from the illness. At the time of his passing on September 3, 2017, Becker, who was 67 years old at the time of his passing, passed away unexpectedly and suddenly from the ailment. His house was located in Manhattan, New York City. In the month of November, his wife, Delia Becker, published a statement that provided some insight into the circumstances surrounding his battle with the illness. However, the statement provided light on his struggle against the sickness, despite the fact that no precise explanation or facts were disclosed at the time of his dying. Becker's lifelong friend and musical colleague, Fagen, issued a statement to the media on the day that Becker died. In the statement, Fagen recognized Becker as having a high level of intelligence, being an extraordinary guitarist, and being an outstanding lyricist. Fagen remembered Becker as having been an exceptional musician. In the statement that he released, Fagen underlined his commitment to ensure that the music that they had created together with the Steely Dan band is maintained for as long as it is feasible to do so. He was cremated after a period of time had passed. The departure of Becker has been met with public expressions of sadness from a large number of musicians, including Julian Lennon, Steve Lukather, and John Daniel of the Mountain Goats. These musicians have also paid tribute to the enormous musical legacy that Becker has left behind. Becker was the producer of Ricky Lee Jones' album Flying Cowboys, and Jones penned an essay for Rolling Stone in which she reminisced on her long-lasting friendship with Becker. Becker was also the producer of the record. During a public ceremony that took place on October 28, 2018, Walter Becker was honored by having 72nd Drive at 112th Street in Forest Hills, Queens, New York City, become known as Walter Becker Way. This was a fortuitous occurrence that had happened. When Walter Becker passed away, Donald Fagen sent an emotional statement to the media in which he fondly recalled his longtime friend and musical colleague. In the statement, Fagen expressed his gratitude for the opportunity to work with Becker. The statement that Fagen released referred to Becker as smart as a whip, an excellent guitarist, and a great songwriter. It has been said by Fagen that he aims to keep the music we created together alive for as long as I can with the Steely Dan band. It is clear from this statement that Fagen is deeply committed to ensuring that their tremendous musical legacy is preserved. The demise of Becker has also been met with expressions of sadness from a large number of well-known artists across the world. Several members of the Mountain Goats, including Julian Lennon, Steve Lukather, and John Darnielle, amongst others, have published sorrowful statements in which they reflect on the influence that Becker has had on their life and the intimate moments that they have shared with him. Ricky Lee Jones, whose album Flying Cowboys was produced by Becker, penned a touching editorial for Rolling Stone in which she reflected on their long-lasting friendship and the immense effect he had on both her music and her life. Becker was the producer of Ricky Lee Jones' record. To further recognize the significance of the contributions that Walter Becker has made, a public event was conducted on October 28, 2018, with the purpose of recognizing the worth of those efforts. During this ceremony, 72nd Drive, which is situated at 112th Street in Forest Hills, Queens, New York City, was ceremoniously co-named Walter Becker Way. This event took place in New York City. The continuous legacy of Becker was acknowledged, and the enduring impact he has had on music and culture was praised as a result of this gesture. The unexpected death of Walter Becker in 2017 signaled the passage of time and the end of an era. Nevertheless, his legacy lives on via the everlasting relevance of Steely Dan's music, which continues to reverberate with listeners all over the world. Beyond the stage, Becker was renowned for his shrewdness, a caustic sense of humor, and his mysterious nature. The insights that he had into music and life, which he frequently shared in interviews and occasional publications, provided peeks into a mind that was as acute as it was reflective. Steely Dan's legacy continues to inspire and influence artists across a wide range of genres, and it is impossible to overestimate the impact that he had on successive generations of musicians and producers. Becker's contributions serve as a testament to the transformative power of artistic collaboration and innovation, reminding us that great music transcends time, genre, and artistic boundaries. Above are the main points about the life and career of Walter Becker, a talented musical artist and co-founder of the legendary Steely Dan band. Becker's musical legacy will always live on in the hearts of fans, and his unique jazz rock melodies will continue to inspire generations of artists to come. Thank you for following the program. Please like, share, and subscribe to support our channel and watch the next videos.